What's up, guys? Welcome to Josh the Toy Doctor. My name, of course, is Josh. Today we're going to be unboxing another G.I. Joe classified figure, number 158. Target exclusive breaker with the cool mass device accessory. So let's go ahead and get into it. So to start off with, let's get her over to the turntable.
Alright, now that we've got Breaker on the turntable, I gotta say I'm really glad that Hasbro has listened to fans that took issue with the windowless packaging before, because we couldn't see the figure, you couldn't tell if it had been replaced, and hiding the beautiful action figure inside cardboard just felt so weird. I like seeing everything again, having the beautiful art as well remain on the package, but also being able to see the figure and its accessories. Now, I would like if we did have a little bit bigger of a window, because as you can see as we get back around to the front here, there is a little bit hidden down there behind the mass logo, which would be where his backpack is, so you can't see all of the accessories. So while the packaging isn't perfect, it does have a nice shelf presence, and I think it looks a lot better than just the cardboard packaging that we had in the windowless era. The carbon fiber texturing or design that they have on it looks really good too, and it's continuing to include that figure number is always a bonus. So I think this packaging looks great and gives a really nice strong shelf presence while not going too far away from the brand. So let's get back into the figure itself though here and free him from the plastic prison so we can check out everything he comes with.
Now that we've gone through the packaging, let's go ahead and swap the cameras and take a look at Breaker. So first thing we are going to need a little bit of a sharp tool here to get ourselves through the security tape. I typically go through the bottom myself. And I haven't actually even opened my other Breaker figure that I've got with the Ram Cycle. It has been sitting in the box basically since I got it back when the Cobra Island figures debuted, so quite a long time, but oh, that was an interesting separation. Let's go ahead and toss that on out of the way. Get his plastic clamshell down and get the packaging out of the way. Alright, so to start off with, we have got all kinds of stuff here in the package. I do like, and one of the things that I've liked to see more with classified is now that we've got some alternate head sculpts, I think that's nice. But Hasbro, one of the things I would like you to start including, extra hands. It makes it difficult to have anything but his weapons in his hand. You can't have him gesturing. Talking kind of looks awkward because most people don't like hold their hands like this while they're talking. So it would be nice to, at least for dioramas, if we got some extra hands, or even if you did something like Volaverse does and offer hand packs. And just as a trial run, I'm actually going to order one of those and see if those hands work with classified figures. If they do, it's a good alternative for now, and honestly it's money that I think Hasbro is leaving on the table. So I do think I'm going to need... I don't want to bend his weapons here. I'm going to just use that to pry up ever so gently and twist the tape out of the way. Now, he doesn't have much in the way of weapons, which is a little bit disappointing, to be honest, seeing as I don't believe the other one actually even has any weapons at all. So this is one of those cases, again, where I would probably look to the aftermarket to arm him a little bit better since he's only got a sidearm and a blade. But let's get his accessories all out of the box. So we'll just pull that cord out. This is easy enough to get out. Difficult to kind of see on the background, but he's just got this tubing that comes with him. And that tubing is a link between his helmet and his backpack, which I think is a throwback to the original figure. But honestly, for the modernization, doesn't make quite as much sense because most telecommunication stuff now can be done wirelessly, so you could do a wireless link there. Just my 2 cents, but it does look neat. We can't remove the magazine, but we can remove the suppressor. So the suppressor came off of his firearm there. And we'll go ahead and set that down. Actually, you know what? I'm going to bring this back in because we can set those there and you guys can see those just a little bit easier. And I really hate the tape. Like, I get that it's a security thing, but I really hate dealing with the tape on especially the knives, because I always feel like I'm going to mutilate something. There's his blade. Nice little blade. Not too rubbery, not too stiff. His backpack. Doesn't feel like we've got any fold-outs or anything. I do like the addition of the frame, because this is a backpack that would be a little bit heavier, so I think that frame adds a nice little bit of detail that it would have. The antennas aren't perfect, but it is what it is, and to be honest, in the real world, I don't think I'd expect those antennas to be perfect either, so there's that. And then, neat little thing with this antenna is it can be rotated around and rotated out of the way. Now, it does kind of get pushed out a little bit because of that, but at least you can rotate it out of the way. Gives a little bit more articulation to it. We've got, I believe this is the meteorite material for the mass device. This is actually pretty neat. It's not like anything special in there. It's just a hard piece of plastic inside of it, but it's a nice little accessory that gives us something else to put in dioramas. One other thing I forgot to mention that I'd like to quick cover is the meteorite or mass device element accessory. This is actually really neat. It's a 3-piece design. I didn't catch this prior. I'm going to bring you guys in just a little bit to take a closer look at it. And it is actually separatable. You just got to be very gentle with it. And the glass tube or plastic tube, whatever you want to call it, since it's not really glass, it is just a plastic tube. That does come off of there. And we can kind of set that off to the side, and then it also separates the element. It's just got a big pin that goes into the bottom, and so you can separate that into 3 pieces and use it a little bit differently. The base is kind of neat. It's just looks a little bit like it's got maybe some kind of feed holes and then some maybe what could be buttons. And then you've just got the basic plastic top. So just note that you can do that. Be very careful not to lose this, and it is probably very easy to break if you put any kind of pressure on this thing. So be very careful with that. You can take it all apart and actually have it either separated to where it's just an empty container. Perhaps he's filling the container, or of course you can have it displayed as you get it by having it full. Couple things to keep in mind. You do got to press it down just a little bit of extra and make sure you don't have any gap at the bottom, and then go ahead and click that on and you'll kind of hear it. It's hard to hear off camera, but you will hear it click a little bit as it gets in. But even then, you'll notice I did just have a teensy tiny gap in there, so you do kind of gotta wiggle that down, get that into place to close that gap up. Just a little neat extra add-on for that. Now back to what I filmed previously. And hopefully it's an indication that we'll potentially at some point be getting the mass device itself, or maybe a Build-A-Figure type thing where over the next few waves we get all the pieces for the mass device. That would be pretty cool too. Would be a little bit of a pain because some of these Target exclusives can be a little bit of a handful to get a hold of. And if you were trying to pre-order these, they sold out very quickly both on Pulse and on Target's website. But at least in my experience, local retail seems to have quite a few of them. So I wouldn't quite give in to aftermarket pricing or eBay pricing just yet, just to make sure you can try and find one local. They do seem to be having restocks, as a couple of the stores near me reported that people bought the last one, and then I saw people a little bit later posting and saying, nope, they've restocked now, so keep looking, is what I'm going to tell you. Here's his communications helmet. Got the nice little microphone on there. We will fit that to him a little bit later. There we go. Look at that. Get a nice little look at his helmet here. And we'll get a look at that on the turntable again when we put him back out there. I'm going to be careful with his bubble gum. I don't want to accidentally rip that. We do have the bubble gum head sculpt. So where he's got gum in his mouth and blowing a bubble, kind of a neat addition. His hair does lack a little bit of detail compared to some other classified figures, but it is still pretty good for the price point. That's it. Everything except for Breaker is out of there, so let's get Breaker out of his plastic prison and huck that off and on out of the way. Bring you guys in just a little bit here. There we go. So, Breaker looks pretty good. I'm going to wait to go over everything on the turntable, but let's start with posability. And before I do that, though, there is one little point that I should call out. He has this cool little computer on his chest that flips open and closed too, so he can be doing something else. And I believe it also can be removed, so he can hold it in his hand. So one extra accessory. It does leave a little bit ugly of a hole there on his vest if you do have it off, but it does allow you to snap that on and off. And then of course we have his initials on his, or his first initial and last name on his vest, which I really like that Classified includes that. Oh, looks like they have his rank maybe too, E4. And then knife holder up here. So head articulation, let's start with that. He's got a ball joint in the bottom of his neck and the top. I think that's a fairly good amount of upward look for him. And you really don't need a ton. Side to side, he's got a lot of clearance to looking to his right, to his left. You are going to come into contact just a smidge with his knife sheath, but overall, not too big of a deal. It does full 360 swivel, though, if you want to go with some weird zombie pose. And then up at the top, you can see we have butterfly joints here in the shoulders. These are not the most mobile butterfly joints that I've seen. We don't get a ton of movement out of them, but you can get a little bit, just enough to open him up. That's not actually that bad. It felt a little bit different. It felt a little worse. But as we look at it and open it up, actually, he does get nice and open shoulders. So I'll take that where we can. All right, so we do get some good mobility there out of the butterfly joints. He's got a full 360 joint inside of that. So his arms can rotate a full 360 degrees. We've got upper bicep twist. It is a little bit limited by the molding. You can see he's got like some wrinkles molded in. It does limit a little bit because it'll rub, but if you get it out, it does twist full 365 degrees. Both sides. Mine are just a smidge tight. And then we've got pinless double jointed elbows, which I've kind of come to expect as a standard at this point. It's 2025 after all. And unless we're talking some of the females that have smaller arms, I don't think there's a reason to do pins. And even on them, I think you can do pinless double jointed elbows. Ooh, this joint. That one's a little tight. That one is not wanting to. There we go. I'm going to say we're going to have to resort to heat on that one, but nope, we can get that fully up, so he can be scratching his head, playing with his communication devices, connecting the telecom port to his head. All kinds of mobility there. You've got the standard Classified wrist pegs, full rotation there, no adjustment or extra hands to use, so we've got those. The watch does not get in the way, full 360 ability there on both hands, so that's good. Going down to the waist, we've got a decent amount of mobility. You can probably go, yeah, you can go all the way around. I would be careful on some of these going all the way around. I took one apart as that I had as a duplicate, a different figure, and the waist on some of them, if it's really tight, do not force it like you're actually damaging it. Don't do that. And then we do have, it's hard to show it off. I don't see any way to take his vest off here. He does have a torso joint, but to be honest, that torso joint is not doing us much favors. You're actually going to be bending more from the waist than anything. You can get a little teeny bit out of that torso. He does have a standard G.I. Joe Classified torso, but it is blocked off a lot by his vest. He's got his belt here. Doesn't really block any of the waist mobility. Does nicely hide the joint though, so that's kind of cool. We do have the standard drop hips, so boop boop, a little bit of drop in those just so you can get some of those other poses without binding that up. So that works on both. Those are nice and firm there, not too tight, not too loose. He's got upper thigh swivel, can go all the way around, and it does bind up just a little bit from the size of this pack on his right leg, but overall not too bad. He's got double jointed pinless knees, and those move freely on that side and freely on that side. Better than some of the other figures I've gotten recently that have had really bound up knees and have needed to be soaked. These ones didn't. He's got upper boot cuts, so you can get nice angle on the feet. And then he's got that same standard kind of pin and rotator joint at the ankle. So nice mobility in the ankles. You can't get quite as much mobility as I'd like, but it's enough so you could, if you wanted to, make him look like he's swimming, have him laying down on a surface, things like that, and get some crawling poses or vice versa out of that. So not too bad. Mobility is pretty good on this figure. I do like it. I'm going to go ahead and get some poses done here. If you want to, in another video, I can show you guys how I walk through and think about some of my posing choices as I pose classified figures, but I'm going to go ahead and send Breaker over to the turntable with varied accessories, try out some things, and give you guys some ideas on how to pose him for your collections, and then we'll do final thoughts. For final thoughts, I want to go ahead and break down some of the things I like about the figure and some of the things I don't like. So I did make a quick list. One of the things that I like about this new wave that's coming out is we're back to the cool plastic windowed packaging. I like it that it feels a little bit more durable than the older packaging, and then you get to see what's actually in it. So if somebody's tried to swap the figure, you know not to buy it. And then you also just get to see if you like the figure out in the box. For people who don't go online and look at the images, they can go into the store and see actually what they're buying as they're holding it in hand. And I think that's a big benefit. And I think that's a big benefit to these figures. Second, I like that it comes with two nicely detailed head sculpts. They're both pretty good. And I like that having that second option just to give them something a little bit different, especially like on some of the other figures that I have where they have two head sculpts where it's maybe like a snarling or a different look, and like the upcoming Pythona figure that was previewed at SDCC. I like that option just to give them something more than kind of what I would call like a blank stare or a plain stare that a lot of the figures come with. But continuing on with that, the figure has pretty good articulation. For the price point, we do get a lot of articulation. The ankles and the wrists leave a little bit to be desired, but overall, they're not the worst joints, and we can get pretty good poses out of these figures for $25. And I've seen a lot more expensive or higher end priced figures that just don't have as good of articulation. So we're pretty lucky with most classified figures that we have that good of articulation. Another point is I think the weapon quality on this figure is better than the ones we've seen in the past. It is a smaller sculpt, but it doesn't seem like it has the same kind of gumminess or softness that some of the other weapons we've seen recently in classified do. So that's really a good thing in my mind. The closer we get to a hard but not brittle weapon, the better, just because then it doesn't bend. We don't get kind of awkward shapes. Like some of the longer guns that we saw that were gummier kind of start to droop and sag, and that's really a detractor if you're displaying a figure long term. Breaker doesn't really have that issue with his handgun, and I don't foresee it happening. The one issue I do maybe foresee happening is that pin right there on the suppressor might wear out, but it is what it is, and I'll take that, not displaying that all the time, to just have a nice weapon that looks cool and has a cool accessory. I think the helmet fits well. I really like the helmet and how the character is added to the helmet. You can see I've got him holding it here, but it's just a nice thing to put in his hand. It fits well with both head sculpts, and you can get the mic out of the way for the bubble. The other thing I really like about this helmet is that the boom is not detachable. Some of you guys who collect the 3.75 inch figure line know that as kids, we lost those, or it was a commonly lost piece. So finding some of those smaller pieces like mic booms now in the future can be tough, and it's just one less thing we have to lose. I do also like that it comes with the multi-piece mass device element. I think this is a cool accessory. I do hope eventually we get the option to either buy a mass device separately, or that as we continue to go on in waves that we get and will finally have a actual mass device. I hope it doesn't take forever, because I do worry that maybe the line will start to see a decrease in sales and that we could be stuck with a incomplete device doing it with that Build-A-Figure style, but I do still hope we get it. It would be cool to have that massive mass device. On to the stuff that really I wasn't pleased with. There isn't a lot on this figure. Some figures I really have a lot to gripe about. This figure, I've only got a few quick things. First, the main one is lack of weapons. I feel like it's a little bit of a bummer that he literally only comes with a sidearm and a blade. No kind of carbine or anything, or carbine, whatever you want to call it, or rifle or anything like that. He's just got his handgun. I realize he's a communications specialist, but I still think going into the field, it would be a lot nicer if he had a secondary option. Maybe something like, and I know some people don't like the sci-fi weapons, but I liked the weapon that came with the first release of Duke. I also really like some of the other SMGs and carbines that some of the figures come with. So I think one of those options, especially if they make them a little less gummy, if it's one of the more recent ones, wouldn't be a bad addition to this figure. Just to give him a little bit something more to add to the value in the package, first of all. And second, just to give him something more to pose with. One thing I feel like is just kind of a oddity about the figure. I don't think it adds or detracts from the figure, but having this data link cable that goes into his communications pack and to his helmet, first of all, the connection is a little bit awkward to get it in there. I do notice one side fits slightly better in the backpack, so it may be that it's specifically sized to do that, but I didn't take any measurements or anything to verify that. I just kind of a general observation. But honestly, like, I don't think that adds a lot to the figure, and it honestly feels like it's some kind of callback to more of their old figures where communications equipment had to have some kind of cabling. So much stuff is wireless now in the modern age that I think leaving that accessory out and including the gun instead, or a extra long gun instead, would have been a better option, because the cable doesn't really add a lot to the figure, in my opinion, and it also just doesn't make quite as much sense with the amount of stuff that is now wireless and the high-tech nature already of G.I. Joe. They could have gone with that, or like what they did with some of those early classified figures, having that G.I. Joe communication device on their shoulder probably would have been a better addition. This next one is less a direct criticism of Breaker, but more criticism of classified figures in general. I think we could, at this price point, still get an additional set of hands, whether it be fists or gesturing hands, and have different hands that are interchangeable with different figures as the line goes on. That way, like, if you get fists with Breaker, you could use Breaker's fists with somebody else if you want to, or somebody else's, like, open hands with them, and not karate chopping hands. They don't always have to be action hands, but hands that suit so we can pose them. I've noticed that Volaverse does this with their action figures, so a lesson to learn maybe for Hasbro is sell an accessory pack for hands. I, for one, would buy an accessory pack with extra hands just for that option, or even other like small accessories. You can include a couple like firearms or other small weapons, and then do a bunch of hands, so that way we can interchange them between figures. And as long as that pin joint's the same and they're roughly the same size, the paint doesn't really deviate all that much on G.I. Joe classified figures. So I think having those hands would be just an extra cool option. But again, not so much a detractor from this figure specifically, but more of just a general kind of commentary on classified. The next one is really another kind of general commentary on classified. And one of the things, and I think this figure, as well as all of the other more recent figures, as the prices have increased, we are starting to see, I think, a pricing out of any type of younger collector. And I've said this in some of the other videos I filmed, you may not have seen them yet, but that I think Hasbro not having a tie-in, either animated series, number one, detracts from getting new collectors into G.I. Joe. And so Hasbro, I think, leaves money on the table there. An animated series may or may not add extra sales for them. It may be a wash, but at least they're getting new collectors coming into the market, so that IP doesn't die off when collectors that are getting older. The other piece of that is I think they're starting to price those kids out. And I'm not saying necessarily that we need to decrease the price of classified, because it could potentially lead to a decline in quality. what I do think is maybe some kind of intermediate figure, so like going back to a 3.75 inch O-ring line as well. And I know that Super 7, I believe it is, has the rights to do that line, or Reaction, I forget who it is. And I've seen some of their O-ring figures in stores, and at $20, they're not even much different. I mean, you got to price it in a line where you can get kids to be able to afford multiple figures, and that's what really got me into it, was being able to play with it with my friends. And there's so much nostalgia around the brand because of that for me, that's why as an adult I continue to choose to collect G.I. Joe Classified. The final one is really less about Classified and even the figure itself, but just as the general ability to get a hold of any type of exclusive figures. I really dislike the idea that they're doing these retail exclusives, and they're so incredibly limited, it seems, that collectors are scrambling, and we have all kinds of scalping, I'm going to say that, going on, because bots can get in and buy stuff ahead of people. And so we get some of these selling out instantaneously on pre-orders and never getting filled at stores. I know with the ferret, a lot of people were upset about that, and the ferret prices have gone up and up. I know, and I mean, I tried to pre-order that day and didn't get one, but now I see other stuff. And the Tiger Paw, same thing. The Tiger Paw pre-orders were gone instantly. At least the market I'm in, I only ever saw one or two of them. I think I saw one that was actually sitting on the shelf when I went to the store. The others I had to ask for and were well into the release, and I had to really hunt to get it. So really, the exclusives I think need a little bit better distribution, or at least some kind of better availability for Pulse Premium members. I think everything considered about this figure, I'm a fan. I actually really like this Breaker. I like the coloring that they did on him. I like the more gray uniform. The green, the olive drab kind of makes figures feel a little bit too plain, but I feel like the gray does a little bit better. I like the detailing on him. I like the computer, and I like having the mass device accessory. I think that's super cool to have some of that stuff we never saw as kids, but now get to have as adults and really wanted as kids, because I always wanted a mass device. I would say this figure is worth a pickup if you can find one. I also would not suggest giving in to eBay prices yet, because I've been going around to local stores looking, and I've still seen a few on the shelf here and there. So don't give in to eBay or aftermarket pricing yet. Keep looking at your local stores. If you're here for G.I. Joe Classified content, my latest G.I. Joe video, you can click this playlist, and that's going to bring you to my G.I. Joe Classified content. If you just want to see my latest video, that's going to be right up here. And with that, guys, I hope you like, share, subscribe, and make sure you hit that notification bell. All these things do greatly help my channel. We'll see you guys in the next one. Yo, Joe.